All right, hi everybody. Welcome to Tip Tuesday number 3. In case you missed it, our first Tip Tuesday was about what your business should do in the face of COVID-19. And last week we talked about tips to be more effective when working from home. If you haven't seen those sessions, be sure to go back and take a look, especially the first one. I'm still seeing a lot of companies out there who are not implementing the tips that we shared related to online communication for COVID-19. So I'm Christina Stetter. I'm the EVP here at Trivera. And this week we are talking about marketing advice during times of crisis. And I'm talking with Jackie Costa. Jackie, can you introduce yourself?
Hi, I'm Jackie Costa, and I am on the content team at Trivera, and I also work on SEO.
Perfect. So before we get started, I do need to mention the bandwidth issue. The whole world is online right now, and sometimes we have some glitches. So please be patient with us. If we freeze up, we will do our best to power through it and get you the information you need. I also want to make sure that I give credit where credit is due. The inspiration for today's session came from an article from the Content Marketing Institute titled, "Should the News Disrupt Your Content Calendar? Here's How to Decide." And this is a really important topic all the time, not just now. I remember back earlier in my career, I was working on a project for a client where they had spent a long time gathering donations for a not-for-profit here in the Milwaukee area. And we'd gotten them some pretty good news coverage. And the end of this project, we were going to be delivering the donations to the nonprofit site, and we had gotten news coverage for that. So the day of the donation came around, the news truck was headed out to the donation site, and while the truck was on the highway on the way there, they got a call that there was a verdict in a major court case here in Milwaukee. And they turned around and went down to the courthouse to report on the verdict, and that was the end of our news coverage. So it can happen to anybody, and I'm sure, Jackie, you have some stories on this too, don't you?
I do. I remember when I was first starting my career, I was a newspaper reporter, and one of my assignments was to cover this local kid who made it to the World Series. And he um, was out there all set to play, and it was out in California, and there was an earthquake. So suddenly my feel-good feature story was turned into a news story, and I had to scramble to figure out how and what I was going to write about.
Yeah, I can't even imagine that. Do you cover the earthquake? Do you cover the kid? Do you cover the kid in the earthquake? That's a tough decision to make, you know.
Though sometimes news events affect other things like your scheduled posts or your blog content. I remember a story from a couple years ago where a major sports apparel manufacturer sent out a scheduled email to runners from the Boston Marathon. And it said, "Congratulations, you made it, you survived the Boston Marathon." Now, this was after the Boston Marathon bombing, but still in really bad taste, very offensive to a lot of runners. And I remember reading that the company sent out an apology, but it was really too late.
Yeah, I
It
can
was
see
already
why they
done.
would have yeah, I can see why they would have set it up like that, because that is something that people say. They'll say, "I survived my first marathon. I survived my first CrossFit class. I did." But with the Boston Marathon, that's a little different because people died because of that. And anybody can make a mistake like that, but it can really be damaging if you don't think it through.
And I think that these kinds of news events can also um, affect your advertising. A couple weeks ago, we caught this tweet from AngelSoft, and if you remember, everybody was toilet paper is not available, but yet AngelSoft was doing TV ads, and they just needed to get out in front in front of it and put out a message like this one.
Yeah, and they did a great job responding on social media, and that's one thing. They paid attention to their social channels. Obviously, they were getting complaints because they were responding to a complaint. So how do you figure this out? Well, the Content Marketing Institute in this article provided 2 simple questions that you can use to help think through what you should be doing. So the first question is, how much does this news relate to our company? And you score it on a 0 to 10 scale. So if your score is between 0 and like 5 or 6, you probably don't need to change anything about your content, and you can think about question number 2. However, if your score is between a 5 and a 10, you might want to change up your regularly scheduled content programming. And you need to make sure when you're thinking about, does this affect my business, that you're not perfectly literal about it. A great example is us here at Trivera. So we're not in the healthcare space, but obviously what's been going on with COVID-19 lately does impact people with their digital communication, and has really influenced the things that we're talking about here on Tip Tuesday, the blogs that we're writing, the newsletter content that we're producing, because people are online more than ever now. And so we needed to recognize that even though we're not a healthcare provider, what's going on in the world does impact our business, because we have advice to offer to help people get through this. So you ask yourself the question, and then what do? Do you have some tips, Jackie?
Well, of course. The first thing you need to do is pull your team together, your content writers, your other stakeholders, and start to brainstorm. Ask yourself questions like, does this affect me in any way? And how do I need to be a part of this? You also want to maybe look at your archives and find out and decide if there's anything that you've written in the past that might be applicable, could be repurposed or updated. And then if you decide that you want to write new content, you can also ask yourself a couple questions. Maybe section out your content ideas, something that everybody's talking about but is necessary. Number 2, maybe you have something to offer that's a little out of the box, but it's still usable. And then the third thing, maybe it's out of the box and interesting, but not appropriate. And in that case, you wouldn't write about it.
Yeah, and I think once you've produced that content, then you have to figure out what to do with it. So you'll want to look at your website, and particularly your homepage, which is always your highest traffic page, as well as your other top trafficked web pages. Maybe that's a good place to call out this new content or to place it, but you should also look at just your regular messaging and your images that you're using right now to see if they are appropriate. I've seen a lot of articles recently about companies who showed a lot of groups and people together in their photos who are now changing up their images to show people more separated, because it just looks kind of weird right now. But you can also look at your advertising. The Angel Soft example is a great one. Sometimes what would be normal is now feeling different to people. And then look at your automated things. So do you automate social posts? Do you automate your emails? Anything that you have set up that happens on its own, you need to look at what can you catch and what can you stop. And think about things like, do you still want to do Throwback Thursday type posts? Everything that you're doing should have a point and should be related to what's going on, if that makes sense for your brand. So now might not be the time to be funny.
Definitely. You'll always want to make sure that what you're putting out there is helpful and not necessarily promotional. What you do put out needs to stay on brand. However, you need to always maintain your brand voice and tone. And if you forgot what that is, well, Trivera has a little archetype or a little branding exercise for you right on our website.
Yeah, so let me show you that. It is right here. So if you go on Trivera.com and you click on resources up here in our top navigation, you'll land on this page. Right here is the archetypes. So if you click on that, it will take you to a page that explains what archetypes are. And then there's a button right here to take the quiz. So you can take this quiz and it can help you understand what's an appropriate way for your brand to be communicating right now. Because if your company is a brand that generally uses humor, maybe you can still continue to be funny. You just need to think about that. And so understanding your brand's personality can make a huge difference in the way that you communicate. Now, that leads perfectly into the next question, which is, how does this impact my audience? So it's not just about you, it's about your audience. And you can score that once again on a 0 to 3 or 0 to 10 scale. So if your score is, say, 0 to 3, you don't really need to change your publishing schedule because your audience is not likely to change the way that they consume your content because what's going on in the world isn't impacting them. However, if you're in that mid-range of like a 4 to 6, you need to do a little research. So you can talk to the influencers in your space, talk to your top customers, do a little social listening, something like that, to try to figure out, should you change your content production? And then the top level of like a 7 to 10 means that your audience is definitely impacted by what's going on. And you need to reassess your publishing schedule because your audience's priorities have changed. And so they might not be consuming your content at all, or they might be consuming it a lot more than they normally do, or at different times a day. So you have to think about that kind of stuff.
And when you decide that it's time to jump into the news cycle, we have this little graphic that we'd like to show. And it just helps explain this theory, this philosophy from David Meerman Scott that says, basically, sometimes you can use the news to generate interest in your brand. And where you can use the news to benefit yourself, you have to jump in early if you want to be part of a news story, or you can avoid it altogether and not become part of the story.
Yeah, I think the bottom line is you just need to pay attention to what's going on around you. And if you have the opportunity to contribute and you can be helpful and do something good, then you want to be part of it. And if not, then you point the arrow in the other direction and you use it to figure out when you can resume your content production. So that's it for today. We hope that you found these 2 questions and these little tips helpful. Be sure to take the archetype quiz if you have not ever done anything like that before. I'll put a link in the comment section on the video. And if you want to learn more about planning your content, Jackie and I actually did a 55-minute webinar where we walk you through the content planning process. So you'll definitely want to check that out. And that's also here in our YouTube channel. So that's it for today. Bye, Jackie.
Bye.
See ya.